This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a highly popular actor, writer, producer, and director who's perhaps best known for his portrayal of Bob Briscoe, better known as Bulldog, the volatile Macho host of the Gonzo Sports radio show on the blockbuster TV sitcom Frasier. And beyond that iconic role, you've seen him in many movies, including Longtime Companion, The Long Walk Home, The Silence of the Lambs, Captain Ron, I Love Trouble, The Fan, Enemy of the State, Crazy Stupid Love, Blonde, as well as the multi-award winning short film Courage Doesn't Ask, and Karl Rove, I Love You, which he co-wrote, co-directed, produced, and starred in, and which won numerous prestigious film festival awards. And on TV, you've seen him in many classic shows, including Roseanne, Quantum Leap, The X-Files, Star Trek Voyager, Touched by an Angel, Ally McBeal, American Dreams, Malcolm in the Middle, Law and Order: Criminal Intent, The Mist, and yes, last year he made a surprise return appearance as Bulldog in the reboot of Frasier. He's also appeared in some great TV movies and miniseries, including The Assassination File, From the Earth to the Moon, More Tales of the City, Prayers for Bobby, to name only a few. Our guest is also a renowned voice actor. He was the voice of Mr. Simmons in the Nickelodeon animated TV series Hey Arnold and in Hey Arnold, the Jungle Movie. He was also one of the voices of those lovable canine poker players on Poker Night. And beyond all of that, our guest has had a very impressive career on the stage. On Broadway, he appeared in The Hot House, Biloxi Blues, 20th Century, and Travesties. And off-Broadway, he wrote and starred in a highly acclaimed one-man show, The Only Thing Worse You Could Have Told Me, for which he was nominated for a Drama Desk Award. He's also appeared in dozens of other stage productions, including Much Ado About Nothing, Waiting for Godot, Old Money, The Irish Curse, When Harry Met Rehab, Another Shot, and many more. I'm delighted to welcome the brilliant Dan Butler to our show. Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for your kind introduction.
Well, you deserved it. You've done a lot. Now, you were born and raised in Indiana. Your father was a pharmacist. Your mother was a homemaker. So you don't come from a theatrical family. I understand you fell in love with the theater as a child after seeing The Music Man. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Well, I think it was always there, but when I saw the movie, my mom noticed how transported I was by just watching, I think, Ron Howard playing Winthrop. So when a community production came up, she noticed the ad for it in the newspaper and didn't even tell me about it. She knew I loved it and had learned some of the music to it. And we were driving home from church and she just said, I'm taking you to something called an audition. She knew nothing what it was about. So she sort of, I spoke of this at her funeral. My husband was just saying, you know, you've told this story before, but she was really like a fairy godmother. It was pretty wonderful.
It sure was that she saw that in you. It's not like you said, oh, Mom, I want to be in that movie. I want to be on the stage. She picked it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, she was a farm girl from Southern Indiana, and she loved her kids, but that, you know, that perception, and she didn't turn into like a stage mom. She didn't want to be, you know, part of it. I mean, she liked being, you know, sitting around and getting that glow from it all, but she wasn't like, I want to be in the center of this experience. This is for you.
You were really, really fortunate. Now, when you were a university student, you received the Irene Ryan Acting Scholarship sponsored by the Kennedy Center, which is actually quite a big deal. Was that the moment when you realized you had what it takes to make a living as an actor?
Well, it was definitely a sign. You know, I hadn't really questioned any of it. I knew I loved it. But, you know, growing up in the Midwest, it's more, oh, it's a hobby and blah, blah, blah. But I think I just, you know, sometimes you wonder, is this is this path something I created before I was born? Or, all right, who knows? It's all a mystery anyway. So I just went on for the ride and I think it began a path. I knew it was a sign to get out of the Midwest. And then it ended really at American Conservatory Theater, where I entered the conservatory there. And that's when I really said, oh, this is what I want to dedicate my life to.
Who were the actors that inspired you when you were a young man?
You know, I can't remember. I'm remembering more who moves me now, because what comes to mind a lot of the time are, supporting characters I see in old movies, that I just go back and watch them, that I they just appeal to me, and that there's a full life there, even though they're sort of like Bulldog was in Frasier, that their important life is off stage. They're just passing through, but I'm so taken by them. But I think if it's an actor I really admire and respond to, is someone I've worked with before, Richard Jenkins, who was part of Trinity Repertory, where I became a member of right after I left American Conservatory Theater.
Oh, yeah, he's a great actor. In the mid 80s, you were in the Broadway cast of Biloxi Blues. You were the understudy for the role of Sergeant Merwin J. Toomey. Did you ever get to go on?
Oh, yeah, I went on for a while. In fact, understudying is not a fun thing to do. And I think all the understudies, we'd be playing Risk backstage because we had to be there at least through the first act. And we'd shut the PA system off because we just, I'm sure a lot of us thought, oh, we're better than the person that's on. But I got a chance to do it, and I was really grateful. I would have not gone to see that show. And it's a great show, and Neil Simon is a great writer. And yeah, it was wonderful to well, it's what has happened through my whole career. You just get taught life lessons by the projects and the parts that come into your life. And I never tire of that happening.
So the movie version of Biloxi Blues featured Christopher Walken playing Sergeant Merwin J. Toomey. What did you think of his performance?
Well, I love Christopher Walken. It's great. I auditioned for that for Mike Nichols and was called back several times. I sort of couldn't believe it was continuing. I knew they would choose a name after a while, but it was I loved the part, and I love what Christopher Walken does. Anything he does, really.
When I was doing my research for this interview, Dan, I discovered that you have the distinction of being one of only two actors to play two different characters in the Hannibal Lecter franchise. In 1986, you played a technician by the name of Jimmy Price in Manhunter. And then 5 years later, in Silence of the Lambs, you played Albert Roden, an entomologist who helps Jodie Foster's character identify the moths that are found in the throats of Buffalo Bill's victims. I think that's really cool that you were in both movies, don't you?
Well, it was a wonderful question and Trivial Pursuit for a while. Yeah, it was. Well, being in Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme was such an incredible human being and director, and that was a blast. Paul Lazar, who played the other scientist, entomologist, and we came up with the idea to have actual bugs as all the players. It was always going to have one beetle as the timekeeper, but we said, oh my gosh, if we're down here, we'd be playing with bugs. So that was fun when they said, oh yes, go ahead, go do that.
Well, for the benefit of any movie trivia buffs out there, the other actor who played two different characters in the Hannibal Lecter franchise is Frankie Faison. Now, Dan, when you were making The Silence of the Lambs, did you have any idea that you would be part of one of the most iconic horror thrillers of all time?
Oh, no, no. I mean, I loved the books, but what really resonated was the power of the person at the top of any project. And with this, it was Jonathan Demme, who, as I said, was a stellar human being. And he treated everyone the same. And you would come to work, and the lowliest person helping park cars was so jazzed to be a part of this endeavor. And you just felt it from everyone. So I think that is what really resonated. The other things are hard to believe when you're filming something and you're going, this is going to be amazing. There are going to be this many people watching it. And I think that's up to a confluence of the stars, whatever happens in the heavens, making something a success. But this was all the people involved with it. It was just wonderful. And I think a lot of that's due to Jonathan.
I'm always amazed when actors tell me that their assessment of whether they enjoyed a job wasn't necessarily about whether the show became huge. It was more about whether they had a wonderful experience doing the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved not only that, but that thing I mentioned before, that I do believe parts and projects come into your life for a reason at that moment. We may not know what that reason is for years to come, but I remember someone mentioning Linda Lavin, who just passed and was an incredible actress and human being. They described her work on stage going, she's aware of the audience and she works with them and everything, but it's sort of like it wouldn't matter if the audience were there or not. She's processing something she needs to process, and we're witnessing that. And that's what I hope I'm doing all the time I approach a part.
I think that does come through. Now, you appeared in 3 episodes of Roseanne as Art, who was coerced into buying a motorcycle. Dan, we've had a lot of guests who've been connected to that show, including one of the writers, Stan Zimmerman, and Michael Fishman, who played DJ, and lots of other actors who've guest starred on the show. But you did 3 episodes. How did you find the atmosphere on the set?
Well, I don't think I was aware of any atmosphere. I loved the part. It turned out 2 of the writers on that show were beginning writers on Frasier, and they didn't recognize that I was the same person that did both those roles. So that was fun. But I got along with Roseanne. I thought she was incredibly smart to learn from John Goodman and Laurie Metcalf. It seemed like it was one of the only shows that was processing working families, and I loved that. When I was on it, it was really at the height of its popularity and I think health. So it was a great experience.
Well, that's good to hear. That's definitely not what most people have told me. They talked about enormous tension, enormous volatility, and quite a lot of unhappiness. So I'm glad it was positive for you, given that you went there 3 times.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I have to ask you a few questions about Frasier. You played Bulldog, who was a notorious womanizer. That is, until we ultimately learned in the reboot series that he's actually gay. Whose idea was it to have Bulldog come out as gay?
I would think it was the writer, or I'm sure it was a collective decision. It's funny because I just was over in Ireland last year doing a production of Tuesdays with Maury, and we do a lot of publicity interviews on the show, and they were asking about the reboot and saying, well, why weren't you invited? And I said, well, I never expected to be, but it would be fun to be on it because I'd love to see either how the character has dealt with the Me Too movement, or, you have those middle-age 180-degree turns. So I think it was like a wish come true. When I didn't know about it until I showed up to do the episode, but it cracked me up. And in an odd way, it sort of fits. I don't think it was like anything suppressed. It's like, I'm into dudes now.
Well, if you were doing Frasier now with the advent of the Me Too movement, which you just mentioned, do you think the Bulldog character would be written the same way as he was back in the 90s?
Probably not. The thing I always loved about the character sometimes a key to a character is, for me, is that I found a motto I think the character lives by. And I don't think the character was ever malicious. I think it's just who he was, and he was saying crass things. I think the character was always the outlet for the writers to say the crassest thing they wanted to say. But I think his motto was, oh, come on, admit it, you really wish you were me. So I think that made him, even if you were disgusted by something he said, you were still laughing.
Oh, yeah, it was very funny. Were you given any input into the storylines or the dialogue involving your character?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's what was wonderful and very healthy about the atmosphere there. There was a mutual respect between the writers and the actors, and you could pitch lines. You could pitch. Well, when I had decided to move on from Frasier, there was an episode where Perry, Roz, and I were having an affair, and we go to a coffee shop, and she's going to dump me, but I say, I'm in love with someone else, and I talked to one of the writers afterwards, and I go, I bet I said that because I'm really in love with her, and wanted to cover myself. So they took that idea and wrote a wonderful episode for the next year. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that really struck me about Frasier was the on screen chemistry between the actors. The atmosphere on the set must have been really wonderful because you can feel it when you watch the show.
Well, I've said this before, but I think that starts with Kelsey and maybe something brought down from Cheers, but it's a combination of most of us knew one another from the theater, and a lot of us have had the experience of the richness of ensemble theater where we're all in this together. And I think Kelsey was very confident in his talent and this great character, but I think his wonderful character attribute is let's all be great. He didn't feel like he had to hog the spotlight. And I think that really pays off and even makes him shine brighter. And that's still there. I found it was still there when I went to do the little spot on the reboot this past year.
I think that's so important what you just said, that his generosity of spirit as an actor and co-worker actually made him better. That's a very, very powerful thing you just said. Now, over the years, you had some amazing guest stars on Frasier: Mel Brooks, Laura Linney, Bill Gates, Reba McEntire, Jennifer Coolidge, Eddie Van Halen, so many more. Do you have any special memories with some of those guest stars?
Oh, gosh. Well, a lot of those Mercedes Ruehl was wonderful. Some of those guest stars were call-ins, because they would have celebrity cameos with all the call-ins to Bulldog show or to Frasier's show. Of course, I loved, this wasn't someone I acted with, but I loved watching the episode with James Earl Jones and Lois Smith. You could probably name many, many others, and I would just go, oh, yes, I forgot. That's wonderful. It was just a great atmosphere. Everyone wanted to be on it, and they were very welcomed, and it was fun.
You mentioned that you were not disappointed that you weren't a regular cast member in the new Frasier reboot. Why not? Didn't you want to be?
No, I love the character. The thing it taught me, when you're a young actor, you always want to do important dramatic roles, and I've had great gifts in that department, but you tend to shortchange sometimes the power of laughter, and that's what that character reminded me. It taught me, because that's lasting. But also, I love and am grateful for the experience, but I think, and it was fun going back, but I think as an actor, it's this, at least for me, I have a restless creative life and I want to keep learning other things. So it was fun to go back as sort of as a reunion and say, hey, how you doing? but what's next? What's new? What can I learn? What can I process right now?
Would you be interested at this point in your life in being a regular on another long-running TV series?
I wouldn't say no to anything. I think it's the quality of it. I'd be really interested in what I magnetize to me because of my interests right now. And I just turned 70 in December. And, this whole threshold, I'm very grateful for something I think was passed on by my parents, especially my mom, that she was so energetic and youthful for a lot of her life. So I'm grateful for that. But also, what's in store now? What new territory? That's what I love about being an actor because we're here to experience life and to hopefully be some sort of channel for issues or whatever's going on. And with acting, I just see it as something you don't ever retire from. You just if your ego or vanity doesn't get in the way, you just keep learning and as long as you can, and then one day you don't wake up.
Well, first of all, happy birthday. Now, of
Thank you.
course, for the benefit of all the Trekkies out there, I have to mention that you played a character named Steph on Star Trek Voyager in an episode from season 4 called Vis-a-Vis. And every Trekkie knows that Steph was one of the many victims of an unknown life form which switched his DNA from male to female. Do you get a lot of attention from Star Trek fans out there?
Not that much, not that much, but it was a lot of fun being on that show.
In 1998, you appeared in a really great TV miniseries, From the Earth to the Moon. You played Gene Kranz, the aerospace engineer who served as NASA's second chief flight director on Apollo 11 and 13. Did you enjoy working on that miniseries?
Oh yeah, I mean Tom Hanks' vision for that and that passion, it was wonderful to be a part of that, and so many people were a part of it. My only regret is we were gonna reshoot a scene and there just was not time. I mean, it was such a monumental undertaking. But oh yeah, it was great. It was great.
Have
Yes.
you ever had a chance to act with Tom Hanks?
No, no, I haven't. That'd be fun.
Yeah, now that he's directed you, it would be fun to act with him. Now, of course, Gene Kranz was a real person that you were portraying. You've also played a number of other real people over the years. You played Vladimir Lenin on Broadway in Tom Stoppard's Travesties. How did you prepare to play Lenin?
Oh gosh. Well, the one thing in there's so many parts to that. Oh gosh, there's still films of him and his I mean within the play, it's really not Tom Stoppard's lines. They're all quotes from Lenin. So I was surprised by his passion underneath passion and heart underneath all the fanaticism. Part of it, this is a complete tangent, but I used to be very judgmental of people that dyed their hair. And of course, I had to dye my hair and beard to be Lenin. And it was very close to the color my hair used to be. So seeing that every day, I went, it's not so bad to dye your hair. But I let it go back to white.
Were you influenced by Maximilian Schell's performance as Lenin in the 1992 movie Stalin?
No, I wasn't aware of it. No.
What about Michael Bryant? He played Lenin in the 1971 movie Nicholas and Alexandra. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. It was mostly the real films and little the Warren Beatty film Reds, and Lennon's just sort of all around the periphery. No, because it's not someone else's performance of him. I think I was more interested in his words and his images.
You also played Truman Capote on stage in Bob Roth's play about Andy Warhol and Truman Capote. Were you influenced by any of the other actors who played him, like Toby Jones or Philip Seymour Hoffman?
Well, of course, Philip Seymour Hoffman's portrayal was. was wonderful. I had been approached to play Truman Capote before in the play True, but I had never been. There was a part of me that said, "No, I want to be the first person to make the strides in this play." And Robert Morris was so wonderful in it. The thing that was great about this, and you may not be aware of it, this opportunity came out of nowhere, and I was called on a Wednesday by a casting director who described the whole play, and it sounded great. And I was taking over for a friend of mine who just became overwhelmed. But they said the first preview is Saturday. And it it just sounded like madness. I'm going, this is insane. Why are you going forward with this? But I realized, when you take a legal pad and put the pros and cons on each side, they were almost identical. And I said, I will, this is so insane and crazy, but I would kick myself in the butt for not taking this on. And, so it was learning all these lines and, of course, taking on Truman Capote's persona and voice. But it was a great adventure, and they backed up the opening for a little bit. And that was the adventure of it all that I just said yes.
So
So,
you had to learn a major role in less than 3 full days.
well, it was, and I was taking some pages on stage with me, but it worked because it was sort of set up like an Andy Warhol art exhibition. So slowly but surely I weaned myself from those, and they made an announcement beforehand to describe the situation I was in, but it was I just kept saying yes to it. And this is where I am. And yeah, and we got to do the audio recording of it a few years back. Yeah, it was a great
You are
experience.
really fearless, I have to say. And Truman Capote is not an easy person to portray. I mean, I don't know if you saw the most recent Ryan Murphy miniseries, Feud Capote versus the Swans, but Capote was played by Tom Hollander.
Oh, yes. Well, and he played the lead in Travesties revival. Tom's an incredible actor, and yeah, from I haven't seen it, but all the little scenes from it, I mean, he just looks brilliant in it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, you're really fearless, as I said. Now, a few years ago, you played Marilyn Monroe's agent in Blonde. And although your character's name was Mr. Shin, it's pretty clear, at least to me, that you were playing Marilyn's agent, Johnny Hyde, right?
For the most part, yeah, yeah. It's sort of in certain parts, it's an amalgamation of him. But yeah, yeah, that's true.
That movie got very mixed reviews. What did you think of it?
Well, I think it was really true to the book and the feeling of the book. I don't think it was something that was just created by the film. Well, I again, it was the experience of working across from Ana de Armas, who was just, I thought she was brilliant in the piece. But I can understand why people would have such a reaction to it.
Yeah, it's a very polarizing subject, Marilyn
Oh
Monroe.
yeah.
Now, Dan, one of the reasons I very much wanted to have you on our show is because as a gay man, I want to acknowledge and recognize some of the things you've done to bring attention to the issues our community has faced over the years. And I want to start with Longtime Companion, which was the first theatrically released feature film to deal with AIDS. What was the impact on you emotionally of being part of that movie?
Well, it's so funny with that. I mean, I was very close to Norman Renee, who was the wonderful director of that piece, and unfortunately died of AIDS several years later. I don't think I was, it was just such a part of our lives. I was grateful for any way I could be active. So I wasn't a prisoner of fear that was going on. And I was so as I have been in many times in my life, so grateful I was a creative person, whether it was an actor or a writer, to just process what was going on because so many people are in the same boat. So yes, to be any part of that was wonderful, and I know Craig, and it was a beautiful piece, and everyone involved with it. Yeah.
Well, you're the third actor from Longtime Companion that we've had on the show. Last year, we had Patrick Cassidy and Bruce Davison on the show. And Dan, I'm so happy to be able to thank you, as I thank them, for being a part of such a monumentally important movie.
Oh, thank you.
I also want to mention your highly acclaimed one man show, The Only Thing Worse You Could Have Told Me, which you did in a number of major cities as well as off Broadway in New York. I want to read you what Variety magazine said about your play. And I'm quoting here. Dan Butler has delivered 14 sharp and compelling scenarios portraying real characters addressing many themes, including gay pride and social discrimination, the politics of the gay movement, the rejection of gay children by their parents, and ultimately the nature of love. Mr. Butler wisely lets these themes bobble up naturally rather than addressing them directly, cleanly slicing to the heart of his characters without excessive sentiment or melodrama. Dan, that's an awesome review. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
People said your one man show was your public coming out because prior to that, you were so well known for playing a macho, womanizing straight guy on Frasier. What was the public reaction when people found out that you were actually gay in real life?
Well, it was probably all over the place. I mean, I hadn't really hidden it, but it just was ironic that I was playing Bulldog at the time this was mounting. The, it was one of those things I think it was another great adventure in my life where I was more scared about writing a one-man show than I was about coming out. I remember being off stage when I was doing the first, like, showing it to people in its very rudimentary shape. And I went, oh my God, what if this means absolutely nothing to anyone but me? And I was so terrified and joyful at the same time because I realized I had not had that feeling since high school. And I said, oh, I don't want to lose this. So I just went on for the ride. And just to bring it up to date, last year, for the first time in 25 years, I did a benefit of it for Friends Charity up here in Vermont, where I am right now. And, I gave a little lead in saying, you're going to need to do a little time travel. There's Clinton was president and we're not as politically correct and everything. But except for a few names and situations, I was so blown away by people's reaction and realizing, oh, it's still very current. It's applicable. I mean, sometimes sadly so, but other times, these are just still issues we're dealing with.
Those themes are very much current, perhaps now more than ever. Do you think that coming out publicly affected your career as an actor?
It may have, who knows? I wouldn't, that's all speculation.
Well, I'm repeatedly told by people in the industry, including actors, that it is still an extremely risky career move for a gay male actor to come out in Hollywood, especially if he wants to be cast as a leading man or an action hero. Do you agree with that?
Well, until you test it, you don't know. I mean, I can see where someone younger and someone that's got a huge career growing would have a lot of pressure by their representatives or their family or themselves, whether to come out or not. I don't know. I don't until you test it and prove it wrong. I mean, we all have to grow up, and sometimes creative people, actors being one of them, can help people in that process.
Oh, for sure. And I think Matt Bomer is a perfect example of someone who really has proven that you can have great success even if you're openly gay. Now, in 2002, you starred in another very important movie called Fixing Frank, in which you played a therapist who said he could cure homosexuality with conversion therapy to make them straight. Was that a difficult role for you to play, Dan?
Oh no, I loved it so much. Ken Haynes' play, he adapted it. I just found it fascinating. And sort of the same way I felt about the play. What I was proudest about, the only thing worse you could have told me, is that I mean we'd have Q&As afterwards, and people would ask, so what's your opinion? You know, where do you land in all these different contradictory opinions? I said, well, I've done my work. You do, you know, I'm not going to say anything. You know, I'm the artist here. And with that, I loved how the with Fixing Frank, this person, the character I was playing, Dr. Apsey, is built up as this horrendous villain. And sometimes he was very appealing and very sexy and seductive. And so I love that it just, you know, people would get upset and say, wait, I don't want to think that way about that person, or and why is the person I should be backing becoming a prick? You know, I just love anything that either as an audience member or as a performer that makes me more alive and throws me into new territory to discover things for myself.
Well, I think the fact that you can do that in a vehicle that also has an important message really makes your contribution not only to the art but to the community very meaningful. Another great movie, which I have to tell you, I watched it last night, from 2009. The movie is called Prayers for Bobby. It told the true story of a woman whose religious intolerance caused her own son, who was gay, to commit suicide. You played a clergyman. Did you get a lot of feedback from people about that movie?
Well, people were moved by it. I was glad to be a part of it because I remember having seen the documentary. I don't know if she was just a part of it or she was the main part of it, having the mother on that. There's a lot of suicide and depression on my mom's side of the family, and I've, you know, volunteered for crisis lines. And so anything that can massage that issue and open it up to people talking about it, whether it's dealing with someone gay or not, I welcome. So I was just grateful to be in some way a helpful spokesperson involved with that.
Well, your scenes primarily were with Sigourney Weaver, who played the mother. They were really a master class because any gay person watching that understood that you must have been feeling a fair amount of frustration and anger and exasperation to be hearing a parent of a gay person saying the intolerant thing she was, but you managed to convey an enormous amount of empathy at the same time. And I thought it was a really layered, textured, very nuanced performance. And for anybody watching, if you have not seen Prayers for Bobby, get a box of Kleenex out and watch it because it's something else. I want to commend you, Dan, for using your talent and your voice to participate in projects that have a positive, significant impact for our community and for the world. Thanks for being such a great ambassador for all of us.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
Late last year, you starred in an off-Broadway play called Another Shot, in which you once again played a radio sports host, except this time your character was an alcoholic. There's a line you said in that play: "I know how thin the ice is I walk on every day." Have you ever felt that way in real life?
Well, you know, I honor anyone who's in 12 step, and I loved doing that show. I don't think that within that context of drinking and having one's life destroyed by that, I don't think I have the equivalent, but certainly the compulsive pulls. And even when you have an objective voice inside you saying, you know what this is, you know what you're doing it anyway, what are you doing? What I loved about the show, and I wished we could have gone longer with our run, is it's so provided a reminder that we needed community to help us all be sober with whatever issue that is, and to I remember someone seeing the show said they felt it was a metaphor for democracy, that we all thrive by keeping one another sober and true and honest. And that's what I most appreciated being part of that.
Yeah, it's a very important message when more and more, increasingly, people are feeling so isolated. Dan, I watched an interview you did a few years ago, and when you were asked about how you handle auditions, you said that your definition of success cannot depend on whether or not you got the job. So, how do you define success in your career?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. That keeps changing, I think. I can still be swayed, there can be a voice that crops up that I have to go, you're a little off balance if this is what's ruling your thought pattern about, I should be acknowledged more, I should be this, or I should be in that. Success, I think, is being creatively active in what moves me. And if there aren't projects that are coming, that I'm able to create them myself, and to be processing those things. I mean, to be happy in my life right now, and to take, right now I'm in sort of a period of creative retreat, and it feels good, because I went through a fairly active time just a little while ago. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I think it did, because I think what you're saying is, if you feel fulfilled by what you're doing and by what's happening in your life, that is success. And you know what? If you can reach the state you're at, what you said, you've turned 70, you look really good, you've had longevity in your career, you've participated in projects that, in my opinion, were not only entertaining, they were enlightening, they were comforting. That's success for me.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, Dan, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and having this opportunity to celebrate your amazing life and career. Thank you so much for all the great performances. Thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Our guest has been the wonderful actor, writer, director, and producer, Dan Butler. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli at the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.